My name is Junior, a 32-year-old software engineer living in Seattle. Growing up in a middle-class household in Ohio with my parents and two siblings shaped who I am today. After finding success in tech, I started funding annual family vacations, something that brought me joy until last year in Florida, when I overheard something that changed everything. My own family was laughing about me being their cash cow, while I was footing the bill for their luxury getaway. Before I tell you how I flipped the script on them, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe for more real-life wake-up calls. I was raised in Columbus, Ohio, in a modest 3-bedroom house with faded blue siding that my father Greg was always promising to repaint. My mother Martha worked as an elementary school administrator while Dad held down a steady job as a sales representative for a local manufacturing company. We weren't poor, but we definitely watched our spending carefully. My older sister Amanda, now 35, was always the responsible one. Straight A student, perfect attendance, president of every club. My younger brother Jason, 29 now, was the family charmer who could talk his way out of almost anything. Growing up as the middle child, I often felt caught between my overachieving sister and my charismatic brother. I wasn't as academically gifted as Amanda or as socially smooth as Jason. What I did have, though, was an obsessive interest in computers. While other kids were playing sports or going to parties, I was taking apart old desktops I'd rescued from neighbors' trash and teaching myself to code on a second-hand laptop. My parents never really understood my passion. Dad would shake his head whenever he found me hunched over a circuit board at 2 in the morning. "Junior, nobody makes money playing with computer parts," he'd say. Mom was more supportive, but still worried I was missing out on a normal childhood. When it came time for college, I applied to every computer science program I could find and landed a partial scholarship to Ohio State. Even with that help, I still had to take out substantial student loans and work part-time jobs to make ends meet. I delivered pizzas, restocked grocery shelves at night, and fixed computers for professors and fellow students on the side. There were semesters when I survived on ramen noodles and free cafeteria crackers just to save enough for next term's textbooks. Amanda had graduated by then and landed a teaching job back in Columbus. She'd sometimes slip me $20 when I visited home, which I appreciated, but also found slightly humiliating. Jason was still in high school, getting by on charm and minimal effort, already planning his business administration degree, that our parents would somehow find a way to fund more generously than my education. Despite the financial struggles, I thrived academically. My professors noticed my abilities, especially in software development and system architecture. By my senior year, I was already fielding job offers. I graduated with honors and immediately landed a position at a promising tech startup in Cincinnati. The starting salary was modest by industry standards, but felt like a fortune compared to my college poverty. Those first few years out of college, I lived as frugally as I had as a student. I rented a tiny studio apartment, drove my college beater car, and put every spare dollar toward paying off my student loans. Meanwhile, I was pouring 60 to 70 hours a week into my job, learning everything I could and constantly improving my skills. When the startup was acquired by a larger company in my third year, I received my first significant bonus. The very next day, Amanda called to ask if I could help with her car repair bill. It was $1,500 she didn't have, and without thinking twice, I transferred the money to her account. The genuine gratitude in her voice made me feel for the first time like I was finally contributing something valuable to the family. A month later, Mom needed dental work, not covered by insurance. Again, I stepped in. By then, I'd paid off my student loans and was earning well above the average for my age. Helping felt good, it felt right. My big break came when I was recruited by a major tech company in Seattle. They offered nearly triple my Cincinnati salary plus stock options. I still remember Dad's voice when I called to share the news. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "Looks like all that computer tinkering paid off after all." The move to Seattle 5 years ago marked a turning point in my relationship with money and with my family. Suddenly, I was the one with resources. I bought a comfortable condo with a view of Puget Sound. I leased a new car. I started investing. And increasingly, I became the family's safety net. Jason needed help with the down payment on his first house. Mom and Dad's roof needed replacing after a particularly brutal Ohio winter. Amanda's son, my nephew Ryan, needed braces. Each time I wrote the check without hesitation. It felt amazing to be able to ease their burdens. Then 5 years ago, during a particularly harsh February, I had an idea. My parents had never been able to afford real family vacations when we were growing up. Our idea of a holiday was a weekend camping trip to a state park, or occasionally visiting relatives in Indiana. They'd never seen the ocean, never experienced true leisure travel. What if I suggested during a family video call, we all went to the Outer Banks this summer? My treat. The reaction was everything I'd hoped for. Mom actually teared up. Dad tried to protest, but couldn't hide his excitement. Amanda and Jason immediately started planning activities. It felt wonderful to give them something they'd never had, a real family vacation, with no financial stress. That first trip was modest by later standards, a rented beach house in North Carolina for a week in June. We cooked most meals ourselves, spent days on the beach, and splurged on just one nice dinner out. The total cost was around $5,000, which felt significant, but completely worthwhile when I saw Mom's face as she walked along the Atlantic Ocean for the first time in her 62 years of life. That night, sitting on the deck of our rental, with a beer in hand, Dad put his arm around my shoulders. "You're a good son, Junior," he said quietly. "I'm sorry I didn't believe in your computer dreams." It was one of the most validating moments of my life. I decided then and there that this would become our annual tradition. Little did I know what that decision would set in motion. That first vacation to North Carolina's Outer Banks set a precedent that would evolve dramatically over the next few years. We all returned home with sun-kissed skin and photo albums full of memories. Mom collecting seashells at sunrise, Dad falling asleep in a beach chair with his hat covering his face, Amanda building sandcastles with Ryan and Jason trying unsuccessfully to surf. For weeks afterward, our family group chat was filled with shared photos and inside jokes from the trip. "This was the best week of my life," Mom wrote in a heartfelt email to me afterward. "Thank you for making it possible." When planning began for the next year's trip, I was still riding high on the emotional payoff of that first vacation. "What about the Grand Canyon?" I suggested. "We could rent an RV and make it a road trip adventure." The idea was met with enthusiasm, though Jason wondered if we could upgrade from an RV to staying at the historic El Tovar Hotel, right on the canyon rim. It was considerably more expensive, but I'd just received a performance bonus and wanted to share my good fortune. That second trip cost nearly twice what the beach vacation had, but the experiences were priceless. We watched the sunrise over the vast canyon, took a helicopter tour over the landscape, and hiked partway down the Bright Angel Trail. Mom, despite her fear of heights, ventured out onto the glass, skywalk gripping my hand the entire time. Dad, normally stoic, was rendered speechless by the immensity of the views. It was worth every penny to see my family experiencing these wonders for the first time. By the third year, something subtle had shifted. When I opened the planning discussion, Amanda immediately suggested Hawaii. "You said you wanted us to see the ocean," she reminded me. "Wouldn't the Pacific be amazing?" It was a significant leap in expense. Flights alone would cost more than our entire first vacation budget. But I'd just been promoted to senior software architect with another substantial salary increase and stock options that were performing well. Hawaii sounds perfect. I agreed, though privately, I was calculating a vacation cost that would now exceed $15,000. It was during that Hawaiian vacation that I noticed the first real warning signs. We'd arrived at our beachfront rental in Maui, a stunning property with direct ocean access and a private pool. As we explored the house, Jason let out a whistle. "Man, Junior, you really went all out this time," he said, opening the refrigerator to find it pre-stocked with food and drinks as I'd arranged. "Next year, we should try for one with a hot tub too." There was no discussion of the cost, no acknowledgement of the financial sacrifice, just an immediate focus on what could be better next time. Mom and Dad at least expressed gratitude, but even they seemed to recover quickly from their initial awe, and soon began treating our luxury accommodations as if they were perfectly normal. During that week in Maui, Amanda approached me about bringing her husband Keith on next year's trip. He couldn't make it this time because of work, but he should really be included in the family tradition, she explained. Of course I agreed, he was family after all. What I hadn't anticipated was that this would open the floodgates. For our fourth annual vacation, We ended up with a significantly larger group. In addition to my parents Amanda Keith, their son Ryan and Jason, we now included Jason's new girlfriend Melissa and my cousin Rebecca, who Mom had invited because she's going through a rough divorce and could use the break. Our destination that year was a ski lodge in Aspen, another first for my family, who had never experienced skiing or mountain life. The costs were mounting with each additional person, but my career continued to advance alongside the vacation expectations. I was now managing a team at my company and had received another substantial raise. Still, as I calculated the expenses for 8 people to enjoy a week at a premium ski resort, including equipment rentals and lessons for everyone, I felt the first twinges of resentment. I quickly suppressed them, reminding myself how fortunate I was to be able to provide these experiences. It was during this Aspen trip that I noticed my family had stopped consulting me about expenses during the vacation itself. Previously, they'd at least check before booking extra excursions or upgrading activities. Now they simply signed everything to the rooms I was paying for. Dad booked a private snowmobile tour for himself and Mom. Amanda scheduled daily private ski lessons for Ryan instead of the group classes I'd arranged. Jason and Melissa added spa packages to their stay. The final bill for that trip was nearly $30,000, a figure I didn't share with anyone. When I mentioned to Mom that the expenses had gotten a bit out of hand, she patted my arm and said, "But you're doing so well now, honey, and it makes you happy to treat us, doesn't it?" It did make me happy, or at least it had, but something was changing. The 5th annual vacation was when Mom first mentioned bringing her sister, my Aunt Paula, and her husband. They've been having such financial difficulties since Uncle Steve's layoff, she explained, and Paula's never been to Florida. Yes, Florida had been chosen as our next destination, specifically a luxury resort in the Keys, with private beach access and daily housekeeping service. By now, the vacation had evolved from a family bonding experience to what felt increasingly like a free luxury holiday for an ever-expanding group of relatives, all funded by me. Still, I agreed to include Aunt Paula and Uncle Steve. I'd always been close to them, and if I was being honest, I enjoyed the role of family benefactor. There was power and validation in being the one who could provide what no one else could. Each time someone thanked me or expressed amazement at the accommodations I'd arranged, it soothed a part of me that still remembered feeling inadequate between my high-achieving sister and charismatic brother. As the Florida trip approached, the group chat became filled with requests and suggestions. "Junior, is there a spa at this resort? Can we get rooms with ocean views? Is jet skiing included?" Each message assumed my agreement with no acknowledgement of the mounting costs. By this point, I had stopped sharing the actual expenses with anyone. My family had developed a carefully maintained fiction that these vacations were somehow easily affordable for me, requiring minimal financial sacrifice. The reality that each trip now cost about the same as a mid-sized car was something we all tacitly agreed not to discuss. And so, as we approached that fateful Florida Keys vacation last year, the stage was set for what would become a painful but necessary awakening. The Florida Keys resort I'd booked for last year's vacation was the most extravagant yet a sprawling property with multiple swimming pools, 5 restaurants, private beach cabanas, and marina access. I'd reserved a block of 6 oceanfront suites arranged for welcome baskets in each room and prepaid for a sunset sailing cruise for our entire party of 12 people. The budget had ballooned to over $40,000 for the week. Due to a critical project deployment at work, I couldn't fly out with everyone else. "Go ahead and get settled," I told them during our pre-trip family call. "I'll join you on Tuesday instead of Sunday." In retrospect, those 2 days would change everything. My flight landed in Key West around 2 in the afternoon on Tuesday. Rather than announcing my arrival, I decided to surprise everyone. The resort staff informed me that most of my family was gathered at the main pool area. As I approached wheeling my carry-on behind me, I spotted them occupying a cluster of premium cabanas, an upgrade I didn't remember approving. I was about 20 feet away, just starting to raise my hand in greeting when I heard my sister Amanda's distinctive laugh. "Junior has no idea how much extra we put on the room charges last year in Aspen," she was saying to someone I couldn't see from my angle. Instinctively, I slowed my approach, stopping behind a large decorative planter. Something in her tone made me hesitate. He's like the family cash cow. At this point, Amanda continued her voice, carrying clearly across the pool deck. Remember when we were kids, and he was always tinkering with those broken computers? Who knew it would make him loaded enough to fund luxury vacations for all of us? I felt as though someone had just dumped ice water down my spine. Cash cow. Was that how my sister saw me? I was thinking next year we should suggest Cancun Jason's voice now. That new resort that just opened, the one with the swim-up suites and personal butlers. Ooh, I saw that on Instagram, Melissa chimed in. It looks amazing. Junior won't mind paying, my mother said, and I could hear the dismissive wave in her voice. He's doing so well with that promotion. He mentioned something about stock options vesting this year too. I didn't remember sharing those specific financial details with her or anyone in my family. Had they been paying that much attention to my career milestones only to calculate what they could extract? Maybe we could even ask for a yacht day next time, my father suggested. I've always wanted to try deep-sea fishing. You know what's funny? This was my cousin Rebecca now. Junior works so much he barely even enjoys these vacations himself. Yesterday, he was on his laptop for 3 hours during prime beach time. That's our Junior, Amanda laughed. All work and no play except when it comes to paying for our play. The group erupted in laughter. My parents, siblings, their partners, even my aunt and uncle. I stood frozen behind that planter. My carry-on handle gripped so tightly, my knuckles had turned white. My chest felt hollowed out like someone had scooped everything vital from inside me. The betrayal was so complete, so casual, that for a moment I wondered if I was misunderstanding something. But there was no misinterpreting family cash cow. No way to reframe the callous planning for next year's even more extravagant trip on my dime. No misunderstanding the mockery in their voices as they discussed my work habits, the very work that funded their luxury. My first instinct was to turn around, get back in the taxi, and fly home to Seattle. But some small, still rational part of me recognized that would only delay the inevitable confrontation. Plus, I'd already spent a small fortune on this trip. Walking away now would be giving them exactly what they wanted, my money, without my inconvenient presence. My second impulse was to storm over and confront them immediately. Let them see the hurt and anger their words had caused. Make them squirm with embarrassment at being caught. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I walked back toward the lobby, waited 5 minutes, then approached the pool area again, this time loudly announcing myself. Hey everyone, I made it, I called out with forced cheerfulness. The transformation was immediate and sickening. Amanda jumped up to hug me. Junior, we were just talking about you. I bet you were, I thought bitterly. The resort is amazing. Jason enthused, clapping me on the shoulder. You've outdone yourself this year, bro. Mom embraced me warmly. We've been having such a wonderful time, sweetheart. Thank you for making it all possible. Dad handed me a beer from the cooler, just in time for the afternoon sunshine sun. Their faces showed no trace of the callous mockery I'd overheard minutes earlier. Had I imagined it? No, the words had been too clear, too specific. Sorry I'm late. I managed to say, accepting the beer with a smile that felt like it might crack my face. Work was crazy. Always working so hard, Amanda said, and now I could hear the condescension beneath her apparent admiration. You deserve this break. Break, I wanted to ask. What break I was. $40,000 poorer, and now carrying the knowledge that my family saw me as nothing more than a convenient ATM. But I said nothing. Instead, I spent the next 5 days in a peculiar state of double consciousness. On the surface, I participated in activities, smiled for photos, and even picked up the tab for an unplanned group excursion to a nearby island. Internally, I was cataloging every entitled comment, every casual assumption about my wallet, every moment that confirmed what I'd overheard. Dad and Uncle Steve ordering the most expensive wines at dinner without a glance at the price. Amanda upgrading her spa treatment from a basic massage to a full-day package. Jason and Melissa extending their stay by 2 days in the suite I was paying for. Mom inviting the couple from the next cabana to join our sunset cruise. Don't worry, Junior's got it covered. Each incident was like a paper-cut minor, in isolation, but excruciating in accumulation. By the time our flight home approached, I felt emotionally flayed. On our last night, as we gathered for a final dinner at the resort's premier restaurant, my mother raised her glass in a toast. To Junior, she said, her eyes misting slightly, "For bringing us together each year and giving us these precious memories. We love you, son." Everyone clinked glasses, echoing their love and appreciation. A week earlier, those words would have filled me with warmth and purpose. Now they rang hollow, performative appreciation for the provider, not the person. I smiled and accepted their toast while something hardened inside me. The flight home was quiet, my mind churning with hurt that gradually crystallized into resolution. This would never happen again. Not like this. But what exactly would I do? Confronting them directly seemed both too emotional and too easy to dismiss. Simply refusing to fund next year's vacation would make me the villain in their narrative. I needed something more elegant, a lesson they couldn't ignore or reframe. As our plane touched down in Columbus, where I'd spend 2 more days before returning to Seattle, I knew exactly what my next move would be. Back in my Seattle condo, after that Florida trip, I felt like I was living in a strange limbo. The spectacular view of Puget Sound that had once brought me such peace now seemed to mock my solitude. I'd built this life, achieved this success, partly motivated by a desire to help the family, that I now realized viewed me primarily as a resource rather than a person. The first week home, I oscillated between white-hot anger and profound sadness. I'd scroll through photos from our Florida trip, everyone smiling, apparently having the time of their lives, and wonder how I could have been so blind. Had there been signs all along that I'd willfully ignored? After 2 weeks of this emotional spiral, I finally called a therapist whose name I'd had saved in my contacts for months, but never contacted. Dr. Elizabeth Harrison had been recommended by a colleague who'd gone through a difficult divorce. "She helps you see patterns you're too close to notice," he'd said. That was exactly what I needed now. In our first session, I unloaded everything: the years of funding increasingly lavish family vacations, the overheard conversation by the pool, the feeling of being used. "It sounds like you've been operating under what we call a covert contract," Dr. Harrison said after listening carefully. "You provide financial support and experiences, and in exchange you expect genuine appreciation and love. The problem is, your family never explicitly agreed to this contract, and over time, your generosity became an expectation rather than a gift." Her words stung with their accuracy. "So I've been buying their love?" I asked. "Not intentionally," she clarified. "But you've created a dynamic where your value to the family is heavily tied to what you can provide materially, and in doing so, you've enabled their entitlement." Over the next several sessions, we unpacked my family history, how being the middle child between an academically gifted sister and charismatic younger brother had left me searching for my own value, how financial success had finally given me a clear role in the family, how funding these vacations had been as much about proving my worth as about generosity. "The most loving thing you can do for yourself, and for them, is to establish clear boundaries," Dr. Harrison advised. "That doesn't mean cutting them off or punishing them. It means creating a new, healthier dynamic." Meanwhile, as May approached, the family vacation planning machine was cranking up right on schedule. Our group chat pinged with increasing frequency. "Junior, have you started looking at destinations for this summer?" Mom texted one evening. Before I could respond, Amanda jumped in. "I vote for Cancun. That new resort that just opened looks incredible." Seconded, Jason replied. "Those swim-up suites would be epic." I watched the conversation unfold, without contributing. They were already planning how to spend my money without even waiting for my input. "Junior, thoughts on Cancun, Mom?" prompted when I hadn't responded for several hours. Still researching options, I wrote back non-committally. "We'll keep everyone posted." That bought me some time while I formulated my plan. In my next therapy session, I discussed the approach I was considering. "I don't want to just tell them no," I explained to Dr. Harrison. "That would make me the bad guy and wouldn't address the real issue. I want them to understand how their behavior has affected me." "What are you thinking?" she asked. "I'm going to plan a vacation that requires everyone to contribute financially, but I'll do it in a way that seems like I'm still handling everything until the last moment." Dr. Harrison nodded thoughtfully. "As long as your goal is healthy boundaries rather than revenge, this could be a valuable learning experience for everyone." That evening, I called my friend Derek, who ran a financial advisory firm. Over dinner at a quiet restaurant, I outlined my situation and my need for advice on setting financial boundaries with family. First rule of financial health, Derek said, twirling pasta on his fork, never give money you can't afford to lose. Family handouts are often just that, handouts, not loans. I've been funding these elaborate vacations for years, I admitted. Honestly, I could afford them financially. It's the emotional cost I didn't anticipate. Derek nodded sympathetically. Money and family are a volatile mix. Have you considered just being direct? Tell them you're not funding the trip this year. I explained my concern that a direct approach would cast me as the villain without addressing the underlying dynamics. Then you need what we call a financial reality moment, Derek said. Sometimes people only value what they pay for themselves. With Derek's advice and Dr. Harrison's support, I began crafting my plan in earnest. I researched vacation options that would appear to align with my family's expectations while actually being feasible for them to contribute to. I settled on a beautiful mountain lodge in Colorado. Impressive, but not extravagant, with activities included but optional upgrades available. Next, I created a detailed budget spreadsheet, breaking down costs per person, including accommodations, activities, meals, and transportation. The numbers were reasonable, far less than they'd grown accustomed to, but still offering a wonderful vacation experience if everyone contributed. Meanwhile, the family group chat continued to bubble with Cancun fantasies. Found the perfect resort, Amanda wrote one evening, linking to a property where rooms started at $700 per night. Junior, can you check it out? Those infinity pools look amazing, Jason chimed in. Looks interesting, I replied neutrally. I'm considering several options. A week later, Mom called me directly. Junior, everyone's getting anxious about the summer plans, she said. Is everything okay? You seem less enthusiastic this year. This was my opening. Actually, I'm planning something extra special this year, I told her, injecting excitement into my voice. I want it to be a surprise, though. Trust me, it'll be our best family trip yet. Oh, her voice lifted with interest. That sounds wonderful. Can you give us any hints? Just that it will be in July as usual, and everyone should block off the same week as last year, I said. I'll handle all the arrangements and send out information packets next month. You're always so thoughtful, sweetheart, she said, and I could hear genuine warmth in her voice. It made what I was planning both harder and more necessary. The calls started coming in regularly after that. Amanda wanted to know if there would be spa services available. The works, I assured her. Jason asked about adventure activities. Plenty of options, I promised. My father inquired about fine dining. Some of the best restaurants you can imagine. I said truthfully, though I didn't mention they'd be paying for their own meals. I spent evenings creating detailed information packets for each family member, complete with glossy photos of the Colorado Lodge activity descriptions and buried in the middle individual cost breakdowns. I designed everything to look professional and exciting, like the vacation of a lifetime. As the weeks passed, I found myself sleeping better. The knot of resentment that had formed in my chest during the Florida trip began to loosen. I wasn't planning this out of vengeance, but out of self-respect, and ultimately respect for my family's dignity. They were all capable adults who could contribute to their own enjoyment. How will they react? Dr. Harrison asked during one of our sessions in June. Poorly at first, I admitted. They've gotten used to a certain arrangement. And are you prepared for that? I thought about the hurt I'd felt overhearing their conversation in Florida, the years of taken for granted generosity, the hollow feeling of being valued for my wallet rather than myself. Yes, I said firmly. I'm ready for this change, whatever comes from it. A month before the planned vacation, I invited everyone to my condo for dinner, ostensibly to reveal the exciting details of our upcoming trip. As I prepared a lavish meal of prime rib roasted vegetables and my mother's favorite chocolate cake recipe, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and liberation. The stage was set for what would either be a painful family rupture or the first step toward a healthier relationship. Either way, I knew it was necessary. The day of my reveal dinner arrived with picture-perfect Seattle weather, clear blue skies, and a gentle breeze coming off Puget Sound. I'd spent the morning cleaning my condo, arranging fresh flowers, and preparing as much of the meal as possible in advance. Everything needed to be perfect not to impress my family, as had been my motivation in the past, but to create an atmosphere where my message would be received clearly. My parents arrived first, Mom, bearing a bottle of moderately priced wine that she handed to me with a kiss on the cheek. "The place looks beautiful as always, Junior," she said, glancing appreciatively around my open-concept living area with its wall of windows overlooking the water. Dad gave me a hearty backslap. "Something smells amazing, son." I gave them a brief tour, noting how Mom lingered in my home office, her eyes widening at the 3 large monitors and elaborate computer setup. "This must be where the magic happens," she commented. "The work that pays for all our fun." The comment, innocent as it seemed on the surface, confirmed that I was doing the right thing tonight. Amanda and her husband Keith arrived next, followed closely by Jason and his girlfriend Melissa. There was the usual flurry of greetings, compliments on the apartment, and excited speculation about the vacation details I'd promised to reveal. "I hope it's somewhere with great nightlife," Jason said, accepting the craft beer I offered him. "Florida was awesome, but the clubs closed too early." "I'm hoping for that Cancun resort," Amanda said, not even pretending it wasn't her expectation, the one with the swim-up suites I sent in the group chat. I smiled non-committally and directed everyone to the dining table, where I'd arranged place settings with a vacation packet at each seat face down for now, with instructions not to peek until after dinner. The meal was a success. Conversation flowed easily. Everyone raved about the food, and there was a palpable anticipation about the vacation reveal. I found myself observing my family with new eyes. Were they always this focused on material things? Had I enabled a side of them that might otherwise have remained dormant? "Junior, this prime rib must have cost a fortune," Dad commented as he cut into his second helping. "Melts in your mouth." "Special occasion," I replied, noting how quickly he associated quality with high cost. After dessert and coffee, I stood up and tapped my water glass for attention. "So I know everyone's curious about this year's family vacation." Finally, Jason exclaimed, "The suspense has been killing me." "Before we get to the details," I continued, "I want to say how much these annual trips have meant to me. Seeing all of you enjoy experiences you might not otherwise have had, it's been one of the greatest joys of my success." Mom's eyes misted a bit. Amanda nodded appreciatively. They had no idea what was coming. "This year, I wanted to try something different. Something that I think will make the experience even more meaningful for everyone." I gestured to the packets. "You can turn those over now." There was an eager rustling of paper as everyone flipped their packets and began examining the cover photo of a beautiful mountain lodge nestled among Colorado pines. "Riverside Lodge in Aspen." Amanda read, her brow furrowing slightly. "But I thought—" "It's one of the most beautiful properties in Colorado," I interrupted smoothly. "Private cabins for each family unit, gourmet restaurant, on-site hiking, fishing, whitewater rafting, and only a short drive to Aspen for shopping and nightlife." I watched their faces carefully. There was confusion. Certainly this wasn't the luxury beachfront resort they'd been expecting, but they were trying to mask their disappointment. "Looks rustic," Jason said, finally flipping through the glossy photos. "Charming," Mom added, though her smile seemed forced. "A mountain vacation could be a nice change." "Keep reading," I encouraged them. "There's detailed information about all the activities and amenities." They dutifully turned pages, scanning the carefully crafted materials. I'd spent hours making everything look premium and exciting, while strategically placing the cost breakdown in the middle of each packet. Amanda reached that page first. Her sharp intake of breath was audible in the suddenly quiet room. "Junior, there must be some mistake," she said, pointing to the section titled, "Your Vacation Investment. This shows costs per person." "No mistake," I said, calmly taking a sip of water to steady myself. "If you read further, you'll see I've already put down the deposits to secure our week. Each person just needs to cover their portion of the accommodations activities they choose to participate in and their own meals and transportation." The silence was deafening. Jason was frowning at his packet, flipping back and forth between pages as if looking for the punchline. Dad's face had flushed red. Mom looked bewildered. Keith, Amanda's husband, was the only one who didn't seem particularly disturbed, perhaps because he'd always assumed he would pay his own way. But, you always cover the family vacation. Mom finally said, her voice small. That's been our tradition. Traditions can evolve, I replied, keeping my tone gentle but firm. I thought it would be more meaningful if everyone contributed to the experience this year. Meaningful, Amanda repeated, an edge creeping into her voice. Junior, you make more in a month than some of us make in a year. This isn't about meaning, it's about you suddenly being stingy. And there it was, the entitlement laid bare. Not disappointment that I wanted to share the experience differently, but anger that I wasn't fulfilling my assigned role as the family bankroll. I'm not being stingy, Amanda, I said, maintaining my composure. I've already covered the deposits, which were substantial. I'm just asking everyone to contribute what they can toward their own enjoyment. But you know I've been struggling since the divorce, my cousin Rebecca protested. I was counting on this vacation. I hadn't even invited Rebecca this year. She'd simply assumed she would be included, as had become the pattern. Rebecca, I didn't actually extend an invitation to you this year, I said as gently as possible. This trip is just for immediate family, and everyone is expected to cover their own costs. Her face fell, and I felt a twinge of guilt, but then reminded myself that her expectation of a free luxury vacation was itself the problem. Junior, Dad said, his tone conciliatory. You know we appreciate everything you've done for the family, but your mother and I are on a fixed income now. This, he gestured at the packet, isn't realistic for us. I've factored that in, I explained. Your costs are subsidized more heavily than the others, and the activities are all optional. You can enjoy the lodge and surrounding nature without additional expense. But it's still thousands of dollars, Mom protested. We just don't have that kind of money for a vacation. Then perhaps we need a more modest vacation, I suggested. One that everyone can afford to contribute to. Jason shook his head, looking genuinely perplexed. I don't understand what changed. You've never had a problem covering these trips before. Did something happen with your job? Are you in financial trouble? My finances are fine, Jason, I assured him. What changed is my realization that I've been enabling a dynamic that isn't healthy for any of us. Amanda narrowed her eyes. What's that supposed to mean? I took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth, the confrontation I'd been both dreading and preparing for. It means I overheard your conversation by the pool in Florida last year, I said quietly, about me being the family cash cow, about how I won't mind paying because I'm loaded, about planning an even more expensive trip this year at my expense. The color drained from Amanda's face. Jason looked like he'd been slapped. My parents exchanged a horrified glance. You heard that, Mom whispered. Every word I confirmed. And it made me realize that these vacations had stopped being about family togetherness and become about what I could provide financially. I was valued for my wallet, not for myself. That's not true, Dad protested, but his eyes couldn't meet mine. It is true, I said firmly. And I take responsibility for my part in creating this situation. I wanted to be the hero, the provider. I wanted your approval and gratitude. But in doing so, I've fostered entitlement instead of appreciation, dependency instead of self-sufficiency. So this is punishment, Amanda said bitterly, because you overheard one conversation where we weren't being perfectly reverential about your generosity. This isn't punishment, I corrected her. It's a boundary. I'm happy to continue our family vacation tradition, but on terms that respect everyone's dignity, including mine. That means everyone contributes what they can. And if we can't afford it, Jason challenged. Then we plan something everyone can afford, I repeated. Or those who can't participate this year save up for next year. That's how most families handle vacations. But we're not most families, Mom said plaintively. We're special. Our tradition is special. Yes, we are special, I agreed. And that's exactly why I believe we can adapt and create a new tradition, one based on mutual respect and shared investment, not just financial, but emotional. The remainder of the evening was tense. There were tears, mostly from Mom, accusations of selfishness, mostly from Amanda, and awkward attempts at mediation from Dad and Keith. Throughout it all, I maintained my position calmly but firmly. The packets remained on the table, some carefully refolded, others crumpled in frustration. As my family prepared to leave, the mood was somber. No one knew quite what to say. The easy assumption of my financial backing had been shattered, and they were all recalibrating what that meant for our relationship. At the door, Dad pulled me aside. "Junior," he began haltingly, "what your sister said at the pool. It was thoughtless. But we do appreciate everything you've done for us. You know that, right?" I looked into his eyes, sincere now, in a way they hadn't been earlier. "I want to believe that, Dad. And this is an opportunity to prove it to yourselves and to me." As I closed the door behind them, I felt a complex mix of emotions, sadness, at the pain I'd caused, anxiety about the uncertain future of our relationships, but also a profound sense of relief. The truth was finally out in the open. Whatever happened next would be built on honesty rather than convenient fiction. I carefully gathered the discarded vacation packets from the table, noting that despite their protests, no one had actually declined the trip outright. They just hadn't been prepared to pay for it themselves. Now the ball was in their court. Would they rise to the occasion and meet me in this new territory of mutual respect? Or would they refuse, revealing that the vacation and perhaps our relationship had always been transactional rather than loving? Only time would tell. The 2 weeks following my revelation dinner were characterized by a deafening silence. Our usually active family group chat lay dormant. My phone rarely pinged with texts or calls, and my daily life in Seattle continued with a strange new emptiness where family communication had once been. I found myself constantly checking my phone, half expecting angry messages or attempts at guilt tripping. Instead, there was nothing, which in some ways felt worse. Had I irreparably damaged my family relationships? The thought kept me awake at night, causing me to question my approach, despite Dr. Harrison's reassurance during our sessions. "This silence is part of the process," she explained during one particularly difficult session. "They're recalibrating their understanding of their relationship with you. That takes time." "What if they decide they don't want a relationship without the financial benefits?" I asked, voicing my deepest fear. "Then that would be painful, but illuminating," she replied gently. "But I suspect there's more substance to these relationships than just money. Give them time to process." On day 16 after the dinner, yes, I was counting, my phone rang with my father's ringtone. I nearly dropped it in my haste to answer. "Dad." "Junior." His voice sounded tired but determined. "Do you have a few minutes to talk?" "Of course," I said, sinking onto my couch, bracing for whatever was coming. There was a pause, and I could hear him taking a deep breath. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "A big one. Of all the openings I'd imagined, this wasn't among them. You do. Your mother and I have been doing a lot of soul-searching these past couple weeks," he continued, looking back at how things evolved with these family vacations. "And you're right, somewhere along the line we started taking your generosity for granted. Worse than that, we started expecting it." "Dad." "No, let me finish," he interrupted. "I raised you better than that. I raised all my kids to be self-sufficient, to earn their way. But when you started doing so well, I guess we lost sight of those values. It became easy to justify letting you foot the bill. He can afford it, we'd tell ourselves. It makes him happy." It did make me happy, I admitted, until I realized I was being valued mainly for what I could provide. "That's on us," Dad said firmly. "Not on you. What happened in Florida, those comments by the pool, that was wrong. Disrespectful. And I participated in it." His frank acknowledgement loosened something tight in my chest. "Thank you for saying that." "Your mother wants to talk to you too," he said. "She's been pretty torn up about all this. But we wanted you to know we're in for the Colorado trip. On your terms." Really, I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. "Really? We've worked out our budget and we can cover our portion. It'll mean cutting back on some other expenses, but that's what adults do, right? Make choices about how to spend their money." The conversation continued for nearly an hour. Dad explained that he and Mom had discussed everything extensively, recognizing patterns in how they'd related to me since my financial success. "We got comfortable letting you be the provider," he admitted. "And that wasn't fair to you, or good for us." By the time we hung up, I felt a cautious optimism. One relationship was on the mend, but what about the others? I didn't have to wait long to find out. That evening, a text came from Jason. "Can we grab a beer tomorrow? Need to talk." We met at a casual brewery near my condo. Jason arrived looking uncharacteristically subdued, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something more reflective. So he began after we'd gotten our drinks. "Dad said he talked to you." I nodded. "He did. He and Mom have been having a lot of conversations with me and Amanda too." Jason took a long sip of his IPA, about expectations and entitlement and all that. And I prompted when he fell silent. "And they're right. I, have been treating you like an ATM." He looked up from his beer, meeting my eyes directly. "I'm sorry, Junior. What I said in Florida was out of line." "It hurt," I admitted. "A lot." "I can imagine." He shook his head ruefully. "The thing is, I don't think I even realized what I was doing. It just became normal, Junior pays because Junior always pays." We talked for nearly 2 hours more openly than we had in years. Jason confessed that he'd been battling his own feelings of inadequacy compared to my financial success. "It was easier to just take from you than to acknowledge how much better you were doing than me," he admitted. "Financial success isn't the only kind of success," I told him. "You've always been better with people, more naturally confident." He smiled slightly. "Maybe. But that doesn't excuse treating my brother like a walking wallet." By the end of our conversation, Jason had committed to the Colorado trip too. "Melissa and I have been talking about it. We can make it work financially. And honestly, I'm kind of looking forward to a vacation that doesn't involve 5-star everything. Might be nice to just hang out, go hiking, actually connect." Amanda proved to be the hardest nut to crack. Another week passed before she finally reached out, and even then, it was via a somewhat stiff text message, "Coffee tomorrow. We should talk about Colorado." We met at a quiet cafe downtown. Amanda arrived, looking composed, but guarded her teacher persona firmly in place. "Keith and I have discussed the trip," she began without preamble. "We've paid our share. The money was transferred to your account this morning." I was taken aback by the businesslike approach. "Thank you, but this isn't just about the money, Amanda. Isn't it?" Her tone was challenging. "You were fine with funding everything until you heard us talking in Florida." "I was fine with it because I thought my generosity was appreciated, not expected or mocked," I countered. "There's a difference." Her composure cracked slightly. The cash cow comment was thoughtless and cruel. I shouldn't have said it. But one bad moment doesn't erase years of gratitude. Was it really gratitude, though? I asked quietly. Or just acceptance of something that had become routine? She looked away, her fingers nervously turning her coffee cup. "Maybe a bit of both," she admitted finally. "The first couple of vacations I was genuinely overwhelmed by your generosity. But then, I don't know, it became the new normal. Expected." We sat in silence for a moment, the ambient noise of the cafe filling the space between us. "I felt inferior to you growing up," I said finally. "The straight-A student, everyone's favorite." Her eyes widened in surprise. "You felt inferior to me, Junior. I was jealous of you." "What? Why?" "You always knew exactly what you wanted. Computers programming, you had this singular focus. I was good at everything, but passionate about nothing." She shook her head. "And now look at you. Wildly successful waterfront condo funding luxury vacations for everyone." "And resenting it," I pointed out. "Yes, because we made you feel like an ATM instead of a brother." She reached across the table to touch my hand. "I am sorry, Junior. Truly. That comment by the pool, it wasn't just thoughtless. It revealed an ugly entitlement I didn't want to acknowledge in myself." By the end of our conversation, something had shifted between us. Not complete healing that would take time, but a new honesty that felt like solid ground to build on. 1 month after my revelation dinner, everyone had confirmed their participation in the Colorado trip on my terms, with each person contributing their fair share. Even cousin Rebecca had reached out apologizing for her assumption about being included and asking if she could join if she covered all her own expenses. The evening before our departure for Colorado, I hosted another dinner at my condo. The atmosphere couldn't have been more different from the Revelation dinner a month earlier. There was an ease, a sense of shared anticipation, and most surprisingly, a new kind of respect in how my family interacted with me. Dad raised his glass in a toast. To Junior, he said not for his generosity with money, but for his courage in demanding better from all of us, and himself. To healthy boundaries, Mom added with a small smile. To Colorado, Jason grinned. On our own dime. To family, Amanda said. Simply, the real kind. As we clinked glasses, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The warmth of being valued for who I was, not what I could provide. Whatever happened in Colorado, that alone made everything worthwhile. The Colorado trip turned out to be nothing like our previous family vacations, and everything a family vacation should be. Riverside Lodge was exactly as the brochures had promised. Rustic luxury set among towering pines and alongside a clear mountain stream. Each family unit had their own private cabin with the main lodge serving as our gathering spot for meals and evening relaxation. But the accommodations were almost secondary to what unfolded between us that week. On our first morning, I awoke to a text from Amanda Coffey on the main deck, just us. We sat watching the sunrise paint the mountain's gold steam rising from our mugs, and she shared something I'd never known. I almost backed out of this trip, she admitted. Not because of the money, but because I was ashamed. Facing you after everything, it was hard. What changed your mind? I asked. She glanced at me with an unexpected vulnerability. I realized I missed my brother, not the vacation funder, my actual brother who used to help me with my computer problems and laugh at my terrible jokes. That set the tone for the week. Without the buffer of luxury and the unspoken financial dynamic, we were rediscovering each other as people. Dad and I went fishing one afternoon, standing thigh-deep in the cold river. I never taught you this as a kid, he remarked, as he demonstrated how to cast. Too busy working overtime to keep the bills paid. You taught me plenty, Dad, I assured him. Work ethic, integrity. Those mattered more in the long run than fishing techniques. Still, he said, watching his line drift in the current, I wish we'd had more moments like this. We're having it now, I pointed out. That's what counts. Mom seemed rejuvenated by the mountain air and the release from the pressure of pretension that had characterized our recent vacations. She organized a wildflower identification hike, packing simple sandwiches rather than expecting gourmet picnics. When she discovered a particularly beautiful blue columbine, her face lit up with a joy that no luxury resort had ever evoked. Isn't it incredible, she marveled? And it's just here free, for anyone who takes the time to notice. Jason surprised everyone by becoming our activity coordinator, researching the best hiking trails, and arranging a group whitewater rafting excursion, all within everyone's budget. I called around and got us a group discount, he announced proudly at breakfast one morning. It was the first time he'd ever taken initiative on a family trip, rather than just showing up and expecting everything to be arranged. Even more surprising was watching my family members handle the financial aspects of the vacation. When we ate at the lodge restaurant, everyone paid for their own meals without awkwardness. When Jason suggested an unplanned horseback riding excursion, he prefaced it with, "It's $75 per person if anyone's interested," rather than assuming I would cover it. The most revealing moment came midweek when we gathered for dinner at a well-reviewed restaurant in nearby Aspen. As the server brought the check, Dad reached for it. "I've got this one," he said. To thank everyone for making this trip happen. The simple gesture, something that would have been unremarkable in most families, felt monumental in ours. It wasn't about the amount, it was about the recognition that contributing within your means was a form of participation and care. On our last night, we built a bonfire by the river. Sitting around the dancing flames, the conversation turned reflective. "I've been thinking about how this trip compares to our others," Mom said, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders against the mountain chill. "And you know what? This has been my favorite." "Really?" Amanda looked skeptical. "Better than Hawaii or the Florida Keys?" Mom nodded firmly. "Those were beautiful places, but I spent half the time feeling like I needed to act a certain way, dress a certain way, because everything was so fancy. Here, I've just been myself." Plus, Dad added, with a wry smile, There's something satisfying about knowing we earned this. All of us. I've been thinking about that cash cow comment, Amanda said quietly, staring into the flames. About why I said it. We all turned to look at her. I think I was trying to justify taking advantage of Junior's generosity, she continued. If I made it a joke, if I acted like he was just this money machine who didn't mind, then I didn't have to feel bad about expecting him to fund my luxury vacation. I did the same thing, Jason admitted. It was easier than acknowledging what we were doing. And I enabled it, I acknowledged. I wanted to be the hero, the provider. It made me feel important, necessary. So we all contributed to the unhealthy dynamic Dad summarized. And we're all responsible for creating a healthier one, Mom added. As the fire burned down to embers, we began planning next year's vacation, a simpler affair to a lakeside cabin in Michigan, with costs divided based on what each person could reasonably afford. The discussion had none of the expectation or entitlement that had characterized previous planning sessions. Instead, there was collaboration, compromise, and genuine consideration for everyone's preferences and means. Back in Seattle a week later, I met with Dr. Harrison for what we'd decided would be our final regular session. You seem different, she observed. More settled. I feel different, I confirmed. The trip wasn't perfect. We had some tense moments, some old patterns trying to reassert themselves, but the fundamental dynamic has shifted. What was the most important lesson for you in all this? She asked. I considered the question carefully. That true generosity comes without strings or expectations, but also that healthy relationships require clear boundaries. I was using financial generosity as a substitute for emotional intimacy, and my family was accepting material benefits as a substitute for real connection. And now we're doing the harder work of actually seeing each other as we are flawed, complex people who can support each other in multiple ways, not just financially. In the months since that Colorado trip, our family relationships have continued to evolve. There have been setbacks, moments when old expectations creep back in, when someone, often me, slips into established patterns. But the foundation has shifted. Amanda called last week to ask for advice on a computer issue, not money for a new laptop, just my expertise and time. Jason invited me to be a groomsman in his upcoming wedding, making a point to tell me that he and Melissa are planning a ceremony and reception within their actual budget. Mom and Dad have started a modest travel fund for next year's family trip, sending me proud updates on their growing savings. Most significantly, our conversations have expanded beyond vacation planning and financial matters. We talk about books, current events, personal challenges, and triumphs. We're relating as individuals with value beyond what we can provide materially for each other. I still believe in generosity. There's still joy in being able to provide experiences or assistance that makes life better for people I love. But now that generosity comes from a place of choice rather than obligation, and it's received with genuine appreciation rather than entitlement. The greatest gift wasn't any luxury vacation. I funded it was the courage to establish boundaries that ultimately freed all of us to build more authentic relationships. By reclaiming my self-respect, I gave my family the opportunity to see me and themselves more clearly. In the end, that was worth far more than any 5-star resort or first-class flight could ever be. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? What was hardest about that process for you? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about navigating complicated family dynamics. Remember, setting healthy boundaries isn't selfish. It's often the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and for the people who matter most. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage in your own.